Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar for the 43 Alumni for Biden PAC. My name is John Farner. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. We are recording this webinar, so we're going to be posting several clips from throughout our discussion today. Happy to have my colleagues from the organizing committee on the webinar as well as our guest, Reed Galen from the Lincoln Project. But first, I want to introduce the folks from the 43 Alumni for Biden PAC organizing committee who's on the call on the webinar today. Go through a little bit of our background. We are going to have a moderated Q&A, so if you do have a question for Reed, please feel free to type that into the Q&A box. Chris is going to moderate that Q&A after Reed's comment, so if something pops in your mind now during any of our presentations or Reed's comments, please go ahead and let us know, and we can go ahead and ask Reed, and we really appreciate all of your time as well as Reed's time as well. So on the call today is Chris Purcell, Abel Guerrera, Karen Kirksey, and then finally David Almasy. We all represent the 43 Alumni for Biden PAC. And David, do you want to go into a little bit of detail about what we've been up to?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. So first of all, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Everyone's time is valuable, and we appreciate the time that you're spending with us to talk about what we feel is probably one of the most important things that's happened in our, in our lifetime as Americans with our democracy, and that's why we got involved. A lot of us have served in the 43 administration under President George W. Bush, and that includes folks who served at the RNC at the time, the White House, and various cabinet level agencies. And, in June, the group sort of launched informally. It was a couple folks led by Karen who just were incredibly frustrated by what we were seeing with the party and with our democracy, and formed the PAC. And from that, it generated a little bit of media attention. And next thing we knew, we had an organizing committee, and a lot of us were like, hey, there are more people than just those of us who were sitting at home sort of what I call silently sulking in some cases and being frustrated but not knowing what to do. And having served in an administration, we understand the importance of governing and leading and uniting this country. And so we decided to pull together and form a PAC and do what we could. And so we launched officially on July 1st. And what was fascinating about that is the response was overwhelmingly positive. We weren't necessarily surprised that we had such a great response, but I think the fact that several hundred people came out of the woodwork almost immediately and started emailing and texting and signing up on the website and saying, what can I do to help? And so what we decided to do was to create some efforts about what specifically you could do to help. So our number one mission is very simple. We just want to elect Joe Biden as the next president. And we are incredibly excited about Kamala Harris as his running mate, and we think that demonstrates a very sound choice. And when you look at what the alternative is and what we've seen over the past 3.5, almost 4 years now come November, I think the choice is pretty clear. And it was difficult for some of us because our group is bipartisan. We have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have independents. But many of us don't recognize the party that we worked so long for and so hard for over many, many years. And so we said, it's obvious that looking at what's happening in the country today and for the future of our democracy, things like integrity and character and moral rectitude, needs to be emphasized in a leader in the Oval Office, not just here at home, but also abroad, and to restore our standing. And, it's interesting, some of the negative feedback that we received from folks, accusing us of being never Trumpers or rhinos or whatever. And, some of us actually supported Trump in the previous cycle. Some of us, as part of our group who worked for the 43rd administration, actually worked in President Trump's administration and have since said, no, he's not the right pick for our country. And we think that we can actually do better. And I look back at what happened in the 80s when Reagan Democrats crossed party line to vote for who they thought was the best leader for our country. And so that's how we view ourselves now. We're doing what's best for our country over party. So it is a bipartisan effort. It was easy for some of us to jump on board, and many of you may feel that it's not such an easy decision because you feel like you're turning on your ideology or your political history and you're loyal to the party. And I would just challenge you to think about, what that looks like in the future and what it is exactly you're voting for. So, so what you can do, we love your support. Anything we can do to elect Joe Biden is what the 43 Alumni for Biden organization is about. Number one thing, of course, is to vote, whether it's in person or by mail or absentee. And no, it won't be fraudulent. So get it done early. There's actually a video that we posted on our YouTube channel where one of the 43 alums walk through all the steps that you need to take. So that's important. Sign up on our website, 43alumni4joebiden.com. And if you're part of the administration or worked in the RNC or a state party or anything during those years, we'd love to have your participation moving forward. And importantly, please, if you're willing to be public about your intent to vote for Joe Biden, we'd love to list your name on our website. You're compiling a list of all those names now, and we hope to be public with that in the next couple of weeks. So, and then beyond that, we do have an email address, alumni@alumni4joebiden.com, or excuse me, alumni@43alumni4joebiden.com. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email us and someone on our team will get back to you. Some of you, and the reason why we have Reed Galen here today, have reached out to us and said, well, I'd love to support you all, but I really love what Lincoln Project is doing, or I love what Republican Voters Against Trump at RVAD is doing, or Gen Z GOP, I want to get involved with that new effort. And so our answer is yes to all the above. You work with all those groups, support all of us, contact joebiden.com, sign up there, do what you need to do to actually help Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get elected. And so we're not asking you to choose one or the other. We all have one mission in mind and one goal in mind, and so we can do it best together. So we encourage you to help wherever you see fit. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Abel to introduce Reed, and let's get rolling. Thank you, guys.
Hey, friends, just to echo what Dave said, it's important for us to get you guys to sign on and approve that we list your name. The more numbers that we can get out there, the better. I've seen our spread list. It's pretty incredible how many people are out there, and it warms my heart. A lot of them are people I worked with in the White House, different agencies, the campaign, and as we all know, it's important to form coalitions. I'm a member of the Lincoln Project's organizing committee here in Texas, as well as the organizing committee here for 43 Alumni for Biden, and I couldn't be more proud to stand with these people. When we work these campaigns, a lot of us have worked more than one, and you miss birthdays, funerals, you sacrifice a lot of time away from your family to get these people elected. But one of the beautiful byproducts of that are the lifelong friendships that we form with people we work with. And one of those guys happens to be Reed Galen. I'm very, very proud of him. Being a founder of the Lincoln Project, I was lucky enough to be his best man at his wedding. I love the guy. I can't say enough positive things about him, and I'm going to turn it over to him so he can give us a few minutes of his time and talk to us about the Lincoln Project. Reed?
Well, Abel, thank you. And let me first apologize on Abel's behalf for anybody he treated poorly over the last 20 years. I will do the same for myself. I looked at the names of the participants as they were rolling in. Some of them, I don't think I've seen you since I had hair on my head and not on my face. So it is heartening to see so many old names and old friends as well. And so I just want to thank Karen and Chris first and foremost for taking the plunge and getting all this together, and John for being patient with my erratic schedule, and David for leading us off. So listen, we started the Lincoln Project last December. As you know, Steve Schmidt, another 43 alumni, and a couple other guys got together and said that there was a lot of quote unquote never Trump groups. I'm not really a huge fan of the name, but we'll take it for what it is. But that as we all know, big, broad thoughts and high-minded words and op-eds and discussions around DC salons just weren't going to do it for this guy. And no matter how many of those meetings I went to, and I think that the folks at those meetings were all well-intentioned, they were talking about how they were going to give Trump a loss, and they were going to make him look bad, and all this other stuff in the context of they could do it without getting their hands dirty. And I took the opposite approach, which was there's no way to do this without taking some of his playbook, frankly, and using it against him. And as so many Texans on the call here can appreciate, I don't know, Matt, how many calls you all made to Red Adair's office over the years, but remember, they picked up the phone, they said, Red Adair, is this an emergency? Because they put out oil fires. And Donald Trump is a political oil fire. You're not going to put him out with water, and you're not going to put him out with sand, and you're not going to put him out with hope. You have to deprive him of oxygen. metaphorically, of course. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. Either don't give him enough space to get the oxygen, or again, metaphorically blow it up. And so I think that's the tack we've taken, going all the way back to the impeachment, when we had these lofty goals of our own about, saving the republic. And then we saw, as COVID came through, that it was really about, political decisions have consequences. And I think that all of us have worked for President Bush. Some of us go back to President 41 and Mrs. Barbara Bush, all the way back to probably 1979 in Iowa. So this is a group that has seen the best and worst of all that politics has to offer. And so from my perspective, I could not be prouder to be part of this group and to be speaking to y'all tonight as one of you. As we rolled through deep into the summer and we saw, the killing of George Floyd, from us, it crystallized things even further, which was after the president's remarks about, looting and shooting and utilizing the words of Bull Connor and George Wallace, we realized this was not just about, a Republican or about a Democrat. This is really about darkness and light, good and evil, the direction we want to go in versus the direction we cannot go in, a good man versus a bad man, a man who has integrity and a man who doesn't know the meaning of the word. And so, from what we have done, and I think you probably have all seen this, is that we take the approach of General Giap, who was the North Korean commander in Vietnam, which is grab him by the belt. So we stay in the president's face each and every day. We don't let him get enough oxygen to start to maneuver. We know this guy, for however you may feel about him, however intense and visceral that feeling might be, we should know that this guy's as slippery as they come. He's the luckiest SOB that probably ever walked the face of the earth, and he certainly failed up better than anybody I've ever seen. And so I think from our perspective, I think David or John maybe talked about country over party. That was one of those things. Look, I left the Republican Party in 2016 after Trump won the nomination. I said, if this is where the GOP is gone, count me out. Especially so many of us that worked for, first Governor Bush and then the president, where there was, not, let me say this, is that he represented a Republican Party in which it didn't matter what your particular belief system was. The ultimate belief was that you went into public service to help all people, or to help as many people as you could help. And I think certainly President and Mrs. Bush, it lived that, and I think they live it to this day. And I don't think they judge people, based on the color of their skin or where they came from, but on the content of their character, and tried to make sure that they were putting, either the state of Texas or the country, and so in some ways the world, in a place where it could do its best work. And I think that he has a legacy. Hard to believe how many of our Democratic friends now talk about how much they love the president back, given all the things they said about him over the years. But you know what? We're in a crazy time, so we'll just say you're absolutely right, and we'll move on. But it's so unbelievable to me, the day and night, way that the President Bush treated the office of the presidency, the White House itself, the resolute desk, with this reverence. He understood, not only from his father's experience, but from his own and living through 9/11 and all that came with that, what it meant to be president of the United States. For President Bush, there was a performative aspect to the job, but the job was far more about doing the people's business and making sure that every American, had the opportunities they were looking for. For Trump, it is nothing but performative. He's been a reality television star, right? He's run a fake, hotel organization for 45 years or whatever it is. And so for him, there is nothing behind the camera. And so we see that now with, all of the COVID-related deaths, there in Texas especially, which is just being overrun. And don't get me started on all the folks y'all have to deal with down there. But what we see now is that, we believe that the strategy has been effective so far, that we keep him off balance. Trump certainly comes from the Roy Cohn school of fighting, which is you punch first and you punch a lot, and you act in such a way that your opponents get scared of you because they just don't know what to do. We have decided that we will not be cowed by his behavior. It's, as you all probably are living some of this too. We get a lot of nasty grams from people that I've worked with for a long time, or we once considered friends. I have a lot of dear friends that work at very high positions within the administration, as I'm sure you all do too. And it's sometimes disheartening to try and sit there and figure out how it is they could stay there. I think a lot of them probably believe if it wasn't me, it'd be somebody worse. But I think that, for the last piece, and then, happy to take any questions, is, I started thinking about this the other day, that President Trump is, he was never really a Republican. and he's certainly never been a conservative. And if we think about the sort of tenets that we all probably grew up with in politics, which was individual liberty and whatever that meant, right? Whether or not that was democracy, whether or not that was freedom of religion, sort of a moral and muscular foreign policy where you stood up to dictators, you stood up for the concept of democracy, you stood up for the act of democracy, or at least a notion of fiscal conservatism that, we should try and do things in a better, more efficient way. We're through the looking glass on all of those things now. And so, I mean, I'm sure it's as disheartening and upsetting as it is to y'all, as with me, that, you see federal forces deployed into Portland, onto America's streets. You see the president, crossing a Pennsylvania Avenue, a street that so many of us were lucky enough to walk down as a matter of course for our daily jobs, taking out peaceful protesters with violent means for a photo op that was a bad one to begin with. And so what I think we're going to see now is that we'll probably see some tightening in the next 80 some days. As Kamala Harris was chosen today, I think she was a good choice. And it's interesting to see how poor the Trump campaign's response to that has been, given that there was only going to be 2 or 3 options and they couldn't seem to figure out which one of them it was going to be and do anything around that. But again, we can do chapter and verse on that. What we'll be doing is, again, continuing what we call our audience of one strategy, which distracts him and upsets him. We have friends inside both the White House and the campaign that we know that when we put a new spot up, we show it on Fox News in DC every night, every single night. We know exactly where he is. He'll be in the residence. He'll be watching Fox News with his cell phone and his big TiVo remote, and he watches those ads and he goes crazy, and he tells somebody to do something about it, and then they try and do something about it, nothing happens, and he goes crazy again. That gives Biden, I think, a lot of clean air to run on. I think that the Trump campaign, again, because of their own incompetence and Trump's just disastrous behavior, have not been able to really lay a glove on Biden. I think that gives him and Kamala a lot of opportunity next week to give their statements and their testimony on what they see as America post Donald Trump. We also have a very robust state operation we have Texas that Abel's been extremely helpful on. All the electoral college states where we've had, between 2,500 and 5,000 people have come to, volunteer. We haven't spent $1 on recruitment. These folks have come to us. We've got more than 500,000 people on the list now. And so we will be deploying them in many of the same ways you guys talked about, which is, voting, how to register for your, request that absentee ballot, how to vote it, how to return it. Remember that in North Carolina, those ballots go out September 5th. So they'll be in mailboxes right after Labor Day. So if you've got friends, family, colleagues, whoever it is, make sure they vote that thing out, so that we can make sure they get that thing out, so we can make sure every ballot is included. We'll be doing a lot of stuff around the election. The post office will have a corresponding 501c4, which will be distinctly on defending democracy and voter education. And then, of course, we will do the ground game pieces that we believe will move that, what we call the Bannon line, which he did as the biggest favor in the world, which said if these guys move 1% to 4% of Republicans and independents off of Trump, that he'll probably not only lose, but lose in a landslide. So with that, guys, gals, I'm happy to take questions. And once again, thank you so much. I hope as they like to say, next year in Austin. But hopefully I'll see all of you before our kids go to college. So thanks again.
Well, thanks a lot, Reed. Really appreciate that. And just to sort of echo that, I mean, now is the time to get involved. If you're ever going to get involved and be on the right side of history, it's now. So you need to make yourself known. And that would be something I would ask a personal favor. Get out there, get involved, be active. Nothing you do is going to be more important than this election right now. So you want to be on the right side of history. With that, we do have a couple questions, and I'll take the first one. You touched on it a little bit. Let's see. It says Trump has already tried to sow the seed of in this election that if he doesn't get the results he wants, and it's not a victory for him, then it's rigged. And then coupled with the fact to slow down the mail system and discredit absentee and mail-in ballots. Is there something that you all are going to look at and address?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, let me just say, and for all the field folks on the phone who must just be shaking their heads at the idea that the president is trying to diminish absentee voting when it was such a cornerstone of so much work we did over the years, both at the presidential level and down ballot as well. This is one where I think it's important to take back a lot. You're going to see this over the coming weeks and months. They're going to start to try and take a unifying message, but it's going to be one of us versus them. And so I think we need to get there first. We need to talk about, and I think this is something really crucial about the fact that most of us are Republicans or were Republicans, is we need to invoke those American symbols and patriotic symbols as much as we can and own those before they can. Donald Trump chose to own the Confederate flag, like make him own it every day. He talks about the American flag, but in the context of a symbol that means nothing to him. We will be doing a lot of work to try and figure out how to disrupt this sort of Trump, Fox, OANN, Bannon, QAnon, Russian wheel of hell. We have some folks on board who are, experts in this kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of work we will be doing that it will not be sort of front and center, but we'll be actively working to make sure that all of the sewage they're pumping into the system is mitigated or at least cut off at the source. We're constantly under assault by Facebook, who's always trying to, get our stuff out of circulation. So we always have to fight back against those things. And so I think that there's a real, again, defend democracy piece of this that I think that our side of the fight is really, I think, uniquely suited to. And so I would venture to say that you'll see a lot of that out of us. Again, we will do things on defending the post office, a lot of education on making sure we do early voting or voting by mail, right? If you get your absentee ballot, you can drop it off, right? You don't have to leave it to the post office to do that. So I think we will be doing a lot of that stuff. And then, again, just making sure that everybody knows that Donald Trump does not represent conservative values. He does not represent Republican values, and he certainly doesn't represent American values. And if you can start to chip away at that, I think it'll be effective in depressing the Republican base, a lot of which is peeled off already because especially those voters in the suburbs, so many of them whom we know or even are, find his, especially his talk of race repellent. And his actions just generally now in the context of COVID and a tumbling economy, it's not funny anymore. It's not sort of hold your nose and do what I have to do. They're actively looking for other options.
Hey, so a couple more questions, but before that, Reed, this is our dear leader, rage tweeting from his golden toilet.
Yeah.
About Lincoln Project. So,
well, I have to say this, that I'm sitting in bed looking one last time at Twitter, which I do all too often. And I see the President of the United States attack us and then attack me by the name of Reed Galvin, Galvin. And I don't know who that poor guy is, but he's getting a lot of hate mail wherever it is. And I feel super bad for him. So Mr. Galvin, I apologize.
So a couple of questions from folks that have come up from folks. One was, are you all doing any internal polling or any polling on the race in general?
We get a lot of polling. We don't do a lot of our own. One thing about being in the foxhole with a bunch of people who are raising money, not in the tens of millions, but in the hundreds of millions, is they do nothing but survey work. And so, we see a lot of that stuff. I think that, the stuff that they're seeing internally and we're seeing internally, I think tracks the public stuff pretty well. I think that what I have asked all of my Democratic friends who have, the resources or can talk to the campaign to do is to get the Biden camp and the Democrats more generally out of the sort of conservative stance, out of the prevent defense, right? Don't protect the lead. That's the fastest way to lose it. And so, I will tell you this, gang, it's not the same. Politics may be, a team sport, but each team plays it very, very differently. And I think there's a reason why we are able to be effective in a way that they aren't. I mean, just take, for example, we did an ad for Biden where we interspersed President Reagan with President Clinton, with President Bush, a top ground zero at 9/11 with President Obama, Trump, and then Biden. No Democratic group can do that, right? There's just too much history with Reagan or Bush. And too many constituencies that would squawk about it. And we were on the phone with some Hollywood people and they said, well, how do you guys win campaigns? Because they really are mystified by it. Like we are almost an anthropological study when they talk to us. And I said, it's because we don't care what people think of us. Now that's probably a little bit like highfalutin just for the crowd that I'm talking to, but it has some resonance of truth, which is, if you find your candidate and your belief, and you believe in that candidate and they're the best person for that job, like we all worked our tails off. And we did, we had the benefit of, not having to worry about every last, iota of difference within the party. We were able to say, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to go do it. And everybody jumped on board and got it done.
This is a question that's come in a few different ways. So either, even if you don't consider yourself a Republican anymore, what is kind of the Republican path back after a Trump defeat?
Y'all are going to have to figure that out. I burn my boats. So, I don't know. I think my fear is that, our former colleague, Ted Cruz, Rubio, Cotton, Hawley, all these guys, I think that they're doing a calculus based on Trump's win in 15 and 16, that they're not going to try and go for some sort of broad-based outlet in 2023, 24. They're probably going to try and find that 25 to 30% of, what are probably now, truly white ethno-nationalist, ugly, folks who believe in real ugliness, to try and keep, close to them, close to Trump, right? Trump probably won't go away even if he loses. He'll have a TV channel or something. And there's going to be a whole bunch of little Trumps who try and do this stuff. And so I think that the party has a reckoning that was probably overdue, certainly to begin with. But I would also say that it's going to need leaders who are willing to stand up for whatever those classical principles were and fight for them. And also, find, a donor set who's willing to, help fund those candidates. And then I think also just, simple stuff like more participation in primaries, right? Like, wackos win primaries because wackos vote. If we had higher turnout in primaries, wackos would lose almost every time. So, and I do say this too, that with, I think now 20 QAnon connected, congressional candidates running for office, at least one or two who are probably going to win. If you don't get it done soon, it ain't going to happen.
Another thought that came in was, why is it important for people who are in deep red or deep blue states to continue to be active and to vote?
Oh, well, look, it's not just a privilege, it's an obligation. I think that all of us, many of us probably grew up in a time when civics was still part of, a public school education. I know I took it in 7th grade, although I grew up in DC, so it was sort of part of life anyway. But I think that, for too long, we decided that, none of this stuff mattered. Whether it was a Republican or a Democrat in office, whatever the office was, they're all crooks. None of it, they're not going to get anything done anyway. And, that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is ultimately you get, two candidates like you did in 2016, where, you had Trump and Hillary. And Hillary is probably the only person who loses to Trump, if you think about it, which is strange to say, because one thing I totally overlooked was how many of, Republican voters just disliked her for 25 years. They were never coming back across the board. And you couple that with a campaign that didn't really have a purpose, didn't have a clear message, didn't certainly have enthusiasm with a lot of the core constituencies of the Democratic Party. And she still only lost by 77,000 votes. So I think, we can't have that kind of depressed turnout again. I think Trump loses a high turnout election by a lot.
Yeah, a couple more. If for our Ohio friends, if you want to maybe talk about your Operation Grant.
Sure. So we're all history nerds in our own way. So obviously we started with Lincoln, and then Grant, not only an Ohioan, but, the general that won the Civil War. And so we wanted to make sure that the president and his campaign knew that we're not taking Ohio for granted. I think it's still an uphill climb for Biden to win, but think about it in the context of keeping the Trump campaign, fighting defense and getting to a place where, I think now their recent advertising was in Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Ohio, and Florida. Those are not offensive buys. Those are defensive buys. When you're spending millions of dollars in the panhandle of Florida, like, the base is not coming home easily to you. And every dollar they're spending down there means they're not spending it in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, or I think Michigan might be off the board at this point. They pulled down their advertising there. The super PACs have pulled down their advertising there. Again, that's not to say that it's a done deal, but it certainly looks like strategically they've said we're not going to get there. And so I think Ohio is one of those where if he loses Ohio, I think it's an almost impossible path for him to victory. And I think that we should not underestimate, especially so many of us that spend so much time on the road, the huge dent in his campaign that not being out there rallying really serves, because that was really the basis of his campaign was being out there every day, which is why I think you now see these 5:30 fever dreams from the Rose Garden or the press briefing room every day, because he's got to get out there in front of the cameras.
Yeah. A couple more things that a number of folks have asked about. Lincoln Project ads in Spanish. Anything happening on that?
Sí, por supuesto. Yes, very soon. We will have.
Is Abel going to be in them?
No, nobody needs to see that. So no, he will not be in ads. So no, we will. I think we will have some more. We will have some general Spanish language ads, I believe, this week. And I'll have to talk to Mike Madrid on our team, and Lionel's working with us as well on some Spanish language advertising. We're going after the 200,000 or so Puerto Ricans who left the island post-hurricane and now live somewhere in the Orlando or I-4 corridor area. So you will see us activating and motivating those folks both with advertising in Orlando and in San Juan to get the folks who are still at home to tell their friends and family, you got to vote against this guy. So, and then I think more broadly speaking, we'll be doing Spanish language advertising in places where we think we can be effective. Again, if I had $500 million, like I do everything everywhere. But I think that finding the way that we can make sure that this game of small numbers becomes small numbers that lean in our direction is, I think, one way that the Spanish language advertising can be helpful.
In terms of obviously there are a lot of Republicans who have drunk the Kool-Aid. They're never coming back, or at least aren't coming back to normalcy anytime soon. What are some of the best ways to identify the types of Republicans or Republican-leaning voters who may be persuadable?
I think look there in Texas. Look at a lot of those races where Beto came close, but there was a wipeout in a lot of congressional districts in the Houston, San Antonio, Dallas suburbs. I think it's people our age, more likely white, college educated, maybe middle to upper income, who live in the suburbs. They're pretty obvious. They grew up in a time when, they're about our age, right? They grew up probably after the civil rights movement, probably grew up in a largely integrated society, both not only from demographics, but how folks live their lives. And so, I think it's one of those things where a lot of the language you hear out of Trump is just foreign to them and they don't understand it. Maybe they held their nose and voted for the guy or thought he was a joke because they just didn't like Hillary. Maybe they were okay with him because the economy was good. But now that they've seen him to be, the failure that he is, maybe they haven't seen their parents, maybe they haven't seen their grandparents. Maybe they've lost a job or, have a child that, I know we're dealing with this. I'm sure many of y'all are too. Like, what's the right decision on school? Well, the school's open. Do we send them there? Well, there's a distance learning. Well, is that going to be okay? What is this year even going to mean? If you've got a child in high school as a sophomore or junior, what is that going to mean for their college career? And so I think there's just a whole bunch of stuff that the pandemic has washed over us that has really changed both the rhythm and rituals of American life. And, we plan to lay it at the feet of the president, every day from here until Election day.
I think probably the last one here.
Sure.
There's some concern that, whether it's our alumni group or Lincoln Project, that we're kind of like, even if we don't live in Washington anymore, that we're just kind of like Washington elitists, insiders, college educated, maybe, upper income, or at least upper middle class, our communication is reaching people that are like us, and it's not reaching, blue collar white folks. How do we kind of address that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think President Bush offers actually a really an excellent example here. He obviously, attended Yale, attended private school, attended Harvard, ran a baseball team, but never thought so much of himself that he was going to talk down to anybody. And I think his ability and willingness, much like his dad, to see people as they are and not as, that, others might see them, is a key point of this. And I think that that's one thing that we will, we studiously try and avoid, which is really from our perspective, we don't care if you live in the Hollow or, you live in the penthouse. Everybody's going to have to deal with some of the same issues. We're in the most analog period of American history that we've been in since like before the iPhone, right? Like we actually have to think about what we're going to do on a daily basis. And that's upsetting and unsettling for a lot of people, because am I going to go to the store today? Do I have to wear a mask? What am I doing with my kids? Is it safe? I haven't seen these people in a while. I didn't really want to see them again, and now I have to. Have they been doing the things they need to do? And so, I think that just understanding also too, that there are a lot of folks for whom this has hit hardest, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective, who are now facing eviction. Maybe they've lost their jobs. They don't know what they're going to do with their kids. Maybe their kids can't go back to school. But if their kids can't go back to school, they can't go back to work. And so I think that really understanding that, the folks who make probably under $50,000 or $60,000 a year, annually, maybe as a family, are probably facing some tough times now that the last water in the hose of federal relief is probably running out about now. My fear is that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to see just a massive convergence of infections, death toll, unemployment, commercial real estate, foreclosures, schools again, closing or opening. College football, as we've seen, is about to go the way of the dodo. And, I'm sure for a lot of us on this phone, Chris has his Longhorn shirt on there. That's a rite of passage for a lot of us in the fall, and that's not going to happen. Instead of, being at the tailgate or listening to Texas Fight in the morning, going out with your friends to Schultz's, you're going to be sitting in your backyard, with your family for the 248th straight day. And I love my family, but it's been a long time. We've been together a long, long time. So, I think the last piece is too, about Biden and Harris is, we sometimes get questioned, if aren't they going to just be like wacky leftists? First of all, I don't think Biden is a wacky leftist. Harris, I think, like we all know with VP nominees, will probably be far more, directed than she's probably ever been in her career, because now she has a significant role, an important role to play in the broader effort to get elected. But I say this a lot, like until and unless we get COVID under control, like none of the rest of this stuff is getting done. There's no wacky progressive agenda. There's no, 68% tax hike. Like they're going to spend the first 12 to 18 months of their administration. And I believe the Pelosi will as speaker, and if Schumer as the leader will too, trying to figure out how the hell to get the country healthy enough to get it back on its feet, back to work and back to school. And I would say this from our perspective is that, we are, again, not Republicans, many of us anymore, but we're not Democrats. And from our perspective, we see ourselves as, and I hope that we will all join in this sometime sooner than later, as something that we used to do a lot in politics, which was be a coalition partner in this stuff. And that doesn't mean we always agree on everything, but that means if we believe that there are certain things that are absolutely essential to get done as a nation, that we'll be there for that fight. And certainly you've seen we have no trouble taking on Republicans. And if we believe that there are some that are being intransigent just for some, bullshit, sticking to fiscal conservatism, which they've never actually lived, but, want to be obstructionist because McConnell tells them to, I don't think we're going to let them get away with that either. Again, that doesn't mean we agree with everything Democrats might want to do, but it sure as hell means we're not going to let people hold the country back for their own gain.
Now, Reed, you brought up evictions. Our dear leader president said he signed an executive order that prevents all evictions. Are you telling me he wasn't being honest?
I have an executive order here too. Yes, it says yes, there will be no evictions. I mean, his executive order is worth I don't know, I'm in my friend's office. This is a page of poetry. So this page of poetry is as likely to get people saved from evictions as his executive order. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, right? Like you have to understand that lying, it's not lying. It's performative, therefore it's real. Remember the movie Cable Guy, right? Where Jim Carrey sees stuff on television and thinks it's real. Like Donald Trump is Cable Guy, like to its worst example, right? Like that's how he sees the world. If it's on television, it's real. If it's in a little pretty book with the presidential seal on it, he signed it, it's real in that moment to him. He doesn't care if people get evicted because he's not capable of it. I mean, he is fundamentally incapable of doing this stuff. I used to say he was unwilling or unable. He's unable. He doesn't have the agency. Just read Mary Trump's book. He does not have the agency to make willingness decisions. He is not capable of it. He is a two-dimensional guy in a three-dimensional world, and we all get the luxury of living through it.
George Costanza, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Exactly.
Right.
So with that, John.
Reed. Hey, Reed. Thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate it. I know we had a lot of questions pop up. I mean, my goodness, of course, you only hit the tip of the iceberg when it came to the questions we received. A lot of them have to do with, how do I talk to my friends to convince them that Biden is the better choice? And these folks consider themselves, my friends are conservatives, Republicans as well. That's one thing that our group is really building that out, those talking points out. We're going to release some pretty soon. We're looking to expand on that. I'm sure Lincoln Project, just look at what they've done as well. We're trying to hit home to convince our friends and family, that Biden is the right choice in this election.
Sure, and I put my email address in the chat there for all the panelists, so please feel free to email me. And look, whatever we can do, guys, we are now the beneficiary of a young man who is like a Twitter savant. And so when we send stuff out, it tends to take off. So whatever it is we can do in that regard to help you all grow and get your reach and your name out there, please, happy to do so.
Well, we really appreciate it. We're a little group of volunteers that came together, Reed, and really appreciate your support. We want to do everything we can do to help you out, and I'm sure vice versa. We're all on the same team at the end of the day. Really, truly enjoy our partnership. And with that said, I wanted to let everyone know that we are having another webinar next week, next Wednesday, the 19th. We're actually having Bill Crystal with RVAT join us as well. So it'll be a good follow-up to your comments, Reed, and really appreciate the partnership with you as well as RVAT and others. So be sure to join us next week for Bill Crystal. Registration's opening up tonight. We'll send that out and on our social media channels. And really appreciate it, Reed. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.